I suppose I should have expected the t-shirt. It arrived in a neatly folded stack, nestled between name cards and printed schedules for our so-called family retreat. I organized the entire thing, booked the oceanfront property, coordinated the flights, covered the expenses. No one even noticed I'd prepaid. And there it was, a shirt with my name, and, just below it, the title, Biggest Disappointment. I didn't laugh, but I didn't protest either. Michael chuckled before I could say a word. It's just a joke, Nat. Lighten up. Sophie winked and added, You've got to admit it's kind of on brand. Even my mother, Diane, let out that dry little laugh she saves for passive-aggressive Christmas cards and bad rom-coms. My father glanced over the top of his wine glass and smiled like someone watching a toddler fumble a piano recital. I smiled too, reflex more than choice, and then I folded the shirt gently, precisely, placing it on the edge of my plate like a napkin. I no longer needed. No one noticed the tension in my jaw, or the way my hands curled slightly beneath the table. If they did, they said nothing. They never did. I excused myself with a small nod, just grabbing something from upstairs. Upstairs in the master suite I paid for, the one with sweeping ocean views and hand-woven curtains, I found the folder. Thick, navy blue, crisp edges. I'd chosen the color to match the table linens, stupidly hopeful that even the presentation might soften what I had to say. Inside were documents I had printed on parchment. Not just paper, something significant, tactile, permanent. The kind of thing you hold on to, pass around, reread when the mood strikes. I'd thought about making a speech. I'd even brought a bottle of champagne. Instead, I walked back downstairs. Nobody looked up as I approached. They were too busy posing for a group selfie in their new t-shirts, the kind you wear once and forget, unless it says something unforgettable. Perfect timing. I stood behind my empty chair, opened the folder, and began tearing, page by page, deliberate, silent, clean. Michael turned first. Wait, what is that? Sophie's brow furrowed. Nat, is that? I didn't answer. I placed the torn halves in front of my untouched meal, gave them one last smile, tighter this time, and said only this, Enjoy the shirts. And then I walked out. No raised voice, no dramatic exits, just the sound of my heels on polished hardwood and the screen door swinging closed behind me. The air outside was salt-heavy, the kind that sticks to your skin like a memory. I didn't take my jacket. I didn't need it. By the time I reached the car, my phone was already ringing. They had finally read what I destroyed, and for once, they were speechless. The truth is, I didn't feel angry. Not really. What I felt was cement, heavy, settled, familiar, like stepping back into a room you swore you'd never return to, only to realize everything is exactly where you left it, including the ache. My fingers rested lightly on the steering wheel, unmoving. The car hadn't even started. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I just stared out at the moonlit beach and listened as my phone buzzed over and over. A small orchestra of panic I refused to conduct. Funny how fast they noticed when the silence broke protocol. They hadn't noticed when I skipped Thanksgiving to close funding, or when I worked nights through pneumonia to finish the beta, or when I sent anonymous payments to cover their mortgage. But rip up a few pieces of paper, and suddenly I'm a headline. This wasn't about a t-shirt. It never was. The label, Biggest Disappointment, wasn't new. It was just the first time they'd bothered to print it. I could trace it back with precision. Childhood moments, cataloged like time-stamped errors. Age 10, Michael breaks a neighbor's window. I get grounded for not stopping him. Age 13, Sophie fails a math test. I'm blamed for setting a bad example. Age 16, I ask for help applying to a coding camp. My father calls it a waste of time. 6 months later, they pay for Sophie's pottery retreat in the Berkshires. By the time I was 18, I had stopped asking, stopped expecting. I learned to file disappointment next to receipts and old birthday cards, things you keep, Not because you love them, but because you no longer feel like throwing them away. I learned to fund my own future. Student loans, freelance gigs, energy drinks and overnights in cafes. I built a prototype between tutoring jobs and late-night debugging sessions. I pitched, got rejected, pitched again, failed often, learned more, raised seed money, built a platform, launched again. I made it, quietly. I never said a word to them, because the last time I shared a win, a small tech award, nothing flashy, my mother said. Is that like a real thing? And Michael asked, so it's like an app that makes memes? I stopped sharing after that. I just watched Sophie post wellness quotes while asking me to cover her therapy bills. Watched Michael upgrade his Audi, thanks to a family loan he never paid back. Watched Ronald and Diane book an anniversary cruise with funds I anonymously transferred to their account when I saw the foreclosure notice on their fridge during a holiday visit. Still, I kept hoping. Somewhere deep down, I hoped that if I gave enough, did enough, became enough, they'd finally see me. Not as the odd one, not as the letdown, but as someone worthy of a seat at the table. So I built the table. The retreat was supposed to be my moment, a gift, a reset. I had folders for everyone. Michael's student debt wiped. Sophie's rent covered for a year and a job referral. My parents' mortgage gone. Retirement secured. All signed, sealed, structured. I even picked navy folders to match the centerpiece florals. It was going to be beautiful. Instead, I got laughter. Instead, I got a joke stitched into cotton. And that was the final proof I needed. Not of who I was, but of who they never intended to see. I didn't make it 5 miles before the first post went live. A blurry photo of the dining table, my empty chair, wine glasses half full, and a cake with cursive icing that read "Family means forgiveness." Cute. The caption? Some people just can't handle being part of a family. We still love you, even when you self-sabotage. Sophie. Of course it was Sophie. No names, no direct jabs, but the implication was clear enough that her followers flooded the comments with the kind of vague sympathy designed to wound by omission. Sending love, you tried your best. Some people just aren't capable of receiving love. Family is messy. Hope you're okay. Messy. That was the word they used when Michael screamed at me for forgetting his girlfriend's name last Easter. When Diane made me cry in the kitchen over cranberry sauce. When Ronald casually asked if I was still doing that internet thing in front of a table full of family friends. They weaponized messy the way some people weaponize religion or nostalgia, gently, with sugar on top, so you feel wrong even when you know you're right. But that wasn't the worst of it. The group chat came next. At first it was just screenshots, a cousin asking if I was all right, my aunt forwarding a voice message from Diane, fake crying, claiming I'd lost it and destroyed important legal documents in some kind of emotional spiral. One message said I might have been on something. Then came the direct text. From Michael, you embarrassed everyone tonight. If you didn't want to be part of this, you could have just said so. You need help. From Sophie, wow, real mature. Hope it was worth ruining the only thing we had left. They acted like I'd burned down the house. All I did was withhold a match they were never supposed to see in the first place. I sat in my car, still parked outside a gas station off Highway 1, and forwarded the original documents. All of them, scanned and watermarked, to my attorney. Subject line, timestamp plus archive. ICCD, my assistant, Jason. His reply arrived 5 minutes later, crisp as always. Would you like me to move the Forbes feature up to this weekend? I can include the scanned pages. Yes, that. Because here's the part they forgot, or maybe never really knew. I don't raise my voice. I raise receipts. The article dropped Sunday morning. It wasn't flashy, no dramatics, just a clean, professional profile of Natalie Moore, the woman behind one of tech's quietest million-dollar success stories, and the family she secretly supported for 10 years before cutting ties. Photos of the documents. Screenshots of anonymous donations linked back to me. The mortgage payments. The private school tuition for Sophie's kids. The debt forgiveness form Michael signed but never read. A quote from me, just one. Sometimes walking away isn't selfish, it's survival. The ripple effect was immediate. Congratulatory messages, old colleagues resurfacing, LinkedIn going wild. But what I remember most was the voicemail from Diane. Natalie, we need to talk. I think there's been a huge misunderstanding. That shirt, it was meant as a joke. We were just having fun. You misunderstood the tone. Ah, tone. The oldest trick in the Gaslight Handbook. Michael posted a thread the next day, claiming I had fabricated a narrative and was exploiting family trauma for attention. He said I'd always been dramatic and obsessed with proving something. Someone responded with a screenshot of the notarized contract I offered him, annotated, dated. Then someone else dug up an old tweet where Sophie called herself the favorite child, obviously, and captioned a picture of me with, "Still wondering what she actually does all day." Poetic, in a way. They tried to paint me unstable, emotional, fragile. Instead, the internet saw a woman with the receipts. A tech influencer I didn't even know shared the article with the caption, "Not every black sheep is lost. Some are just done with wolves in cardigans." I couldn't have scripted it better if I tried. And still, I said nothing. Publicly, not a word. No rebuttal threads, no TikToks, no Notes app apologies. Silence became my brand, and clarity my signature. That silence, oddly enough, was what made them scream louder. Ronald and Diane tried the back-channel approach. Emails to old family friends, framed as concerned parents worried their daughter had been swept up in the toxicity of startup culture. Michael uploaded a podcast episode titled "The Myth of the Self-Made Sibling." It had 3 listens. One of them was Jason. The other 2 were probably bots. Sophie tried to host an Instagram live, cried on camera, called me unwell, claimed the article was out of context. Halfway through, someone commented, "Why are you talking about your sister when she hasn't mentioned you once?" The damage wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. A cousin reached out and said she always knew something was off, how I was treated. A former neighbor messaged to say they remembered Diane brushing off my internship as a phase, while bragging about Michael's coding boot camp, which I paid for. By the way, it didn't feel like vindication. It felt like quiet alignment. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was losing my mind trying to make people see what was right in front of them. They saw, and now they couldn't unsee it. The week after the article, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, lavender envelope. My mother's penmanship, unmistakable. "We're still your family. We love you. We hope you'll move past this." As if this were a phase, a tantrum, a misunderstanding. They still didn't get it. They didn't understand that I didn't walk away out of rage. I walked away because, finally, I knew I didn't need to be in a room that only saw me as valuable when I was invisible. I didn't need the applause. I never did. All I needed was permission to stop trying. And for the first time, I gave it to myself. You'd think after the article dropped, after the contracts, the receipts, the silence that spoke louder than any response ever could, they'd stop. They didn't. They doubled down. Michael went on a tirade, a full 12-tweet thread, all rage and spin, accusing me of revisionist history, emotional instability, and, my personal favorite, rebranding family neglect as entrepreneurship. He even dropped the phrase trauma marketing. A mutual connection replied with one sentence, "That's rich, coming from a guy who borrowed $10 from his unstable sister to start a t-shirt brand that never launched." The comments didn't go how he'd hoped. Sophie started calling extended family. She told them I'd changed. that I was being manipulated by online fame. She said I'd lost myself in tech money and ego, which is ironic, considering she once asked me to fake being her employer so she could get a credit card approved. Ronald and Diane stayed quiet, publicly, but I knew from a former neighbor that they were working the phones, framing everything as a miscommunication. The word kept appearing in whispers. It was just a miscommunication, as if a decade of erasure could be filed under clerical error. But here's the thing about narratives. When the story stops working, people stop playing along. My cousin Layla, who used to parrot Diane's judgment like gospel, sent me a message. I know I wasn't always kind. I see it now. I'm sorry. A friend of Michael's who I barely knew DMED. He used to laugh about how you funded everything. Said he deserved it after what you put him through growing up. I never understood that. I do now. And then there was Ella, one of the only friends I'd ever truly let in, who said it best over coffee. One foggy morning, you weren't too much. You were just too awake. But if the public shift stung, it was the private unraveling that struck deeper. Sophie's husband left, quietly, took the kids and moved in with his sister. No announcement, no drama, just gone. Someone told me he said he wasn't interested in building a brand around victimhood. Michael lost a podcast sponsor, then a small speaking gig. One of the organizers messaged Jason, asking for clarification on his inconsistencies. Jason just forwarded the Forbes article. Ronald and Diane tried to refinance the house. The bank flagged the application for instability of ongoing external support. Translation: I'd stopped the monthly transfer. That part, I'll admit, was intentional. It wasn't punishment. It was release. I'd been keeping them afloat like some invisible net. Quiet, steady, discreet. Now they were feeling the ocean floor for the first time. And I was floating. For the first time in years, I traveled without sharing an itinerary, ate dinner without guilt, slept without triple-checking my inbox for the next crisis I was expected to fix before being forgotten again. There's a particular silence that follows peace. Not the tense quiet before an argument, but the stillness that arrives when you realize no one's coming for you anymore. No more negotiating for love. No more emotional promissory notes. Just air, just breath, just self. And then one night, weeks after the article and the fallout and the message from Layla, I got a DM from someone I didn't recognize. It said, "Thank you. I walked away from my family last year. Reading your story reminded me why I was right to do so." That one stopped me. Because here's the thing. I didn't share my story to be a symbol. I didn't plan for a ripple. I wasn't trying to go viral. I just wanted my story back. I wanted my silence to be mine, not something filled by other people's narratives of who I was and why I was broken and where I'd gone wrong. I didn't burn the house down. I left the door open and walked out. They're the ones who set fire to everything, trying to chase me down with a lighter in hand. And in that space they tried to fill with shame. I built something else. Not a mansion, not a brand, not a monument to survival. Just a small life that finally felt like it belonged to me. I started working on a new project, not a startup, not a platform, a grant, quiet, anonymous, meant for kids who'd been called too much, too sensitive, too dramatic, the ones who built futures in silence, hoping someone would see. I named it after a line from Diane's last letter. "You've always been different, different." They meant it as judgment. I repurposed it as freedom. And while they scrambled to reshape the story, to rebrand, to claw back sympathy with curated pain, I lived, unapologetically, softly, honestly. And every now and then, I'd hear something. Michael trying to rebrand, Sophie guesting on podcasts about navigating complex sibling dynamics, Diane mentioning in a book club that I was a successful consultant, a quiet plea for relevance disguised as humility. I never responded, because they weren't talking to me. They were talking to the version of me they thought they owned. But she was gone, and I wasn't interested in bringing her back. 2 years later, I was at a wedding. Not a family one, a friend's. One of the few who stuck around when I disappeared for months after the story broke, who didn't ask for details or sides, just sat beside me while I remembered how to breathe like I wasn't being watched. The reception was in a sunlit garden, strung with warm lights and lavender centerpieces. I was sipping champagne, tucked into a quiet corner between the dessert table and a makeshift dance floor, when a woman I didn't recognize approached. She smiled, a little hesitant. "You're Natalie, right?" I nodded. She leaned in slightly. "Sorry, I don't mean to be weird. Are you the t-shirt girl?" And just like that, I laughed. A real one. Full-bodied, unscripted, echoing off the glassware. "Yeah," I said, still smiling. "That's me." She smiled back, softer this time. "I walked away from my parents last year. My brother called me selfish. My mother told everyone I was having a breakdown. But then I read about you, and I realized I wasn't crazy, just done. I didn't know what to say. Sometimes, silence is still the best answer. Not because there are no words, but because there are too many, and none of them would fit inside the moment." She squeezed my arm lightly and walked off, and I just sat there, watching her rejoin a group of friends who greeted her with laughter and easy joy. The kind that doesn't ask you to earn your place at the table. It just pulls out a chair and says, "We're glad you're here." I'd spent so long thinking walking away meant giving up, but it wasn't surrender. It was the first time I ever stood with myself. That thought lingered as I drove home that night. No tears, no spiral, just a kind of peace I hadn't known existed outside fiction or overpriced yoga retreats. The kind you don't chase, the kind that arrives only when you finally stop running toward the people who built you to break. Back at my apartment, tucked into a drawer I rarely opened, I found the box. Not fancy, just a pale gray cardboard archive box, the kind meant for tax records or old birthday cards. Inside were the originals, the first versions of the documents I tore in front of the family I once would have burned for. I ran my fingers along the edges, the thick cream paper, the navy blue seals, the embossed signatures, still beautiful, still untouched, but now they didn't feel like ghosts. They felt like proof that I had once believed in something impossible and tried anyway. I could have mailed them again, framed them, published them. Instead, I closed the box and slid it back under the bed. Not out of bitterness, out of release. I didn't need them to see anymore, because the version of me who needed their recognition no longer lived in this body. She's gone. She left quietly, sometime between the moment I tore those pages and the day I stopped checking for their names in my inbox. In her place is someone I finally recognize, someone who answers to no one but her own peace. It's funny, people still ask, occasionally, if I regret going public, if I regret walking away, if I miss them, and the answer? I don't know if they talk about me, if they lie about what happened or reshape it into something digestible. Maybe they miss me, or maybe they just miss the version of me they could control. I don't reach out, and they haven't either, not in a long time, and maybe that says everything. I still get updates sometimes, stray mentions from acquaintances who don't realize I don't want to know. Michael tried to rebrand. Again, some startup with vague language about family-first funding. It's been dormant since March. Sophie attempted to publish an essay in a mid-tier lifestyle magazine. A redemption arc in the making. It was pulled before print. Sources didn't match. One of the editors follows me on Twitter. Ronald and Diane. They sold the house. I don't know where they went. I don't check. Not because I don't care, but because the story they wrote me into was never mine to begin with. And now, finally, I've stopped trying to edit it. I live differently now. Not louder, just clearer. I take mornings slowly. Eat breakfast without a screen. Talk to my plants like they understand. I still build things, projects, grants, tech mentorships. But not for applause, not for redemption. just because I can, because I want to, because every line of code I write, every email I send, every person I fund is a reminder that I built myself back, not from ashes, but from silence. Not every story ends with fireworks. Some just end with the quiet closing of a door that should have stayed shut a long time ago. And sometimes, that's the happiest ending of all. Story 2. I'm Cole Whitman. I'm 24 from a small town outside Savannah, Georgia, where folks think success means having dirt under your nails and a truck in the driveway. My dad, Marty, ran a lawn and tree service for over 3 decades. He built it from scratch, and he was proud of that. Real proud. The kind of guy who measures a man's worth by the sweat on his shirt. So when I turned down working full-time for him to study finance and data science, that was basically treason. You don't have the head for real success, son, he told me once, without even looking up from his paperwork. I was 20 then. What he didn't know was that I'd already started writing the code that would change everything. 3 years later, I was on the front page of a major finance site. But before that, it was all silence. Long nights, takeout containers, the hum of my cheap laptop, and that relentless loop in my head, prove him wrong. While my friends were out partying, I was sitting in a dusty apartment in Colombia, building an algorithm to track and predict stock behavior with terrifying precision. My roommate, Theo bless him, was the only one who ever took me seriously. He kept me fed when I forgot to eat and sat through more pitch rehearsals than any human should. Meanwhile, my dad would pass by my room whenever I visited home, shake his head, and mutter something about boys and their toys. Every insult just made me double down. I taped rejection emails on my wall like badges of honor. Too young. Not enough experience. Fine. I didn't need their validation, but I still remember the worst hit. Last Thanksgiving, the first overheard him say to my uncle, "Cole, be back trimming hedges by summer." He couldn't sell water in the desert. They laughed. I swallowed it, ate my turkey in silence, drove back to Colombia, then locked in the biggest deal of my life. Let me rewind a second. From age 12 to 18, I worked every summer for my dad's company. Up at 6 mowing lawns, hauling mulch, getting baked under the Georgia sun. He taught me the value of sweat and hustle. Sure, but somewhere along the line, he mixed up hard work with hard labor. When I got into the University of South Carolina's business program, he just grunted and handed me a crumpled $20 bill. College boys think they know everything until they meet a weed they can't pull, he said. That was his version of a send-off. My mom, Joanne, was different. She taught middle school and had a heart that could carry a small city. Before I left, she slipped me $500 in 20s and whispered, "Make yourself proud, not just us." Never said a word in front of my dad. Fast forward, sophomore year, my algorithm catches the eye of a visiting lecturer from New York. "This could disrupt the entire brokerage model," he said. I dropped out 2 months later. Mom cried. Dad hung up. I lived on ramen and ego for 2 years. Pitched VCs, who didn't even finish their coffee before walking out. Every no added fuel. And then everything flipped. I woke up to an email from Ridgeway Equity, $13.7 million licensing deal for exclusive use of my tech. I stared at it like it was written in another language. I called Theo. He screamed like a maniac. I called Mom. She cried again, but this time, they were the kind of tears that don't sting. Dad? I didn't even text him. A week later, I was in Manhattan, signing the deal. The Ridgeway folks took me to a dinner where the menu didn't have prices. The CEO, a woman named Fiona Graves, raised a glass to the future of finance. I smiled politely but couldn't stop hearing my dad's voice. "You don't have the head for real success." That night, in my hotel room, I opened my laptop. There I was on the homepage of Financial Weekly. 24-year-old dropout signs 8-figure Fintech deal. My face was there, right next to the headline like a badge. My story, my name. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm, finally clear. The next day, I walked into a Ferrari dealership in jeans and a hoodie. The sales guy didn't even glance at me until I mentioned the Roma. 2 hours later, I drove out in one. It wasn't about the car, it was about the message. I didn't tell anyone I was coming back home, but I knew my dad's Memorial Day BBQ would be happening. He throws the same one every year. Clients, employees, extended family, all packed into his backyard so he can show off the business he built from nothing. I showed up at exactly 2:00 p.m., engine purring, exhaust growling, every head turning before I even hit the gravel. I parked next to Dad's prized pickup, the one he used to say was the definition of a real man's ride. Stepped out with my keys in hand. No flashy clothes, no entourage, just me. Mom gasped. Someone dropped a paper plate. My dad? He froze mid-flip at the grill. His spatula just hung there. Sorry I'm late, I said, walking up. Traffic from New York's a nightmare. He recovered quick, slapped on his salesman's smile. Well, look who decided to visit. He eyed the car. Whose ride did you borrow to make that entrance? It's mine, I said, soft but steady. Bought it yesterday. A few chuckles. Uncle Lou elbowed someone. Rich friends, huh? I pulled the title from my back pocket and handed it over. Dad unfolded it. His face didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then he handed it back. Must be nice having rich friends willing to loan you a name. And just like that, he turned back to the grill. The rest of the afternoon was more of the same. Every time I tried to tell him about the deal, he changed the subject to lawn equipment or fertilizer trends. One of his clients asked me about the article. Dad cut him off mid-sentence. Can't believe everything you read. Journalists twist everything these days. By the end of the day, I was done. But I stayed. I waited until the crowd was gone. Found him in his little home office, same one I used to sneak into to play games on his old desktop. Dad, I want to talk about the company, about the future. He didn't even look up. You got lucky with some flashy computer crap. Doesn't mean you're special. It's not luck. It's $13.7 million. He looked up then, eyes hard. You know what built this family? Waking up at 5 a.m. every damn day. Breaking my back for 3 decades. Not sitting in a chair pressing buttons. He pointed at an old photo of him at 21 next to his first mower. That's real work, he growled. I didn't argue. I just left. Mom was doing dishes. She turned when I walked in, drying her hands. He's proud, she said, softly. He just doesn't know how to show it. I shook my head. He's not proud, Mom. He's scared. And I wasn't wrong. The next morning I got a text from my cousin Drew. Uncle Marty's telling everyone your car's rented and the deal was fake. I didn't even flinch. That week, things spiraled. I started hearing rumors from church, from my old neighbors. My dad was calling around. Even reached out to Ridgeway pretending to be part of my legal team. He was trying to discredit me, undermine the one thing I'd built. I should have been angry, but I wasn't. I was ready. I stayed in Savannah that week, holed up at a boutique hotel downtown. Not at my parents' place. I didn't even tell them I was in town. I figured if Dad wanted to tell folks I was a fraud, let him do it without knowing. I was 3 blocks away sipping black coffee and planning my next move. Theo texted, dude, your dad showed up at the apartment, asking where the money is going. Should I be worried? Then Drew messaged again. Uncle Marty told the church you're under investigation, said Ridgeway's pulling out. Even Fiona from Ridgeway called me. Hey Cole, someone called pretending to be your father, asking for contract details. We didn't give him anything, obviously. Just wanted you to know. That's when it hit me. He wasn't just doubting me anymore. He was trying to sabotage me. Quietly, behind the scenes. Spinning stories before I could say a word. Probably hoping I'd vanish like a puff of smoke, so he wouldn't have to face the truth his way wasn't working anymore. I stopped by my parents' house one afternoon. Timed it so Dad would still be out on the job. Mom opened the door with this look part relief, part worry. Made coffee, sat me down like I was 10 years old again. What's going on with Dad? I asked her. calm. She wrapped her hands around her mug like it could shield her from answering. He's scared. The business isn't doing well. It hasn't for a while. That caught me. Then why didn't he say anything? Pride, she said. No hesitation. Turns out, the newer landscaping chains were underpricing him, eating into his client base. He'd mortgaged the house 3 years ago, bought new trucks, new branding, knew everything to keep up. But the numbers didn't work anymore. His margins were trash, and he was drowning slowly. And he's watching you succeed, she said, in a world he doesn't understand. He doesn't know how to handle it. That's not my fault, I said. No, she replied, but it's becoming your problem. I left that conversation feeling like someone had punched a hole through my chest. Not because the business was failing, but because my dad was too stubborn to let anyone help, including his own son. I needed perspective. So I called my Uncle Darren, Dad's younger brother, and co-owner of the company. We met at a sports bar out near the river. He didn't beat around the bush. He's gonna ask you for money, Darren said after 2 beers. Said he's thinking of pitching it as a partnership. Wants your computer money to save the business. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because it was sad. So he thinks I'm a screw-up, I said, but wants my money to keep his dream alive? He doesn't think you're a screw-up, Darren replied. He thinks admitting you're right means he was wrong. And that's not something Marty knows how to live with. I drove past the old office that night. Lights were still on. Saw my dad inside, hunched over his desk, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not physically, just diminished. Like he was fighting a battle he'd already lost, but couldn't walk away from. I wasn't angry anymore, just disappointed. Not in him, he'd done what he thought was best, but in the fact that he couldn't see how we could both win. The next morning, I got a text from him. Let's talk business. Dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m. Don't be late. I stared at the message for a while. Then I responded, sure. I didn't go. Instead, I spent the next 2 days doing what I did best, researching, planning, building. I called Fiona at Ridgeway. Do you know which landscaping companies in the area are buying up small businesses? I asked. By lunchtime, I had a list of 3. 2 of them were growing fast. One was hunting for a company exactly like Langford Outdoor. Next, I called a real estate agent. I needed space, not an office in Anchor, a place I could build something real in Savannah. Found a 14,000 square foot warehouse near the Port District. Beautiful bones, terrible lighting, perfect. Then I met with the CEO of Southern Edge Landscaping, Harold Gentry. Older guy, smart eyes, dirty boots. We sat in his office while he cleaned grease off his hands with an old rag. We've been watching your dad's business for years, he said. Great customer loyalty, tight crew, but he won't take our calls. What if I could change that? I asked. By the end of the day, I had a written offer. $1.2 million to buy Langford Outdoor outright, nearly double what it was worth on paper. Plus, 5-year salary for Dad as regional manager. The entire crew kept on with raises and health benefits. A real future. I spent that night finalizing everything. Then called Drew. You still looking for a job? Wait, seriously? You'd hire me? You always believed in me. That matters more than any resume. Next day, I showed up at my dad's office without warning. He looked up from his desk, already irritated. Well, he muttered. Decided to show up after standing me up? I sat down and slid a folder across his desk. What's this? Your big idea? It's an acquisition offer. His face twisted. You went behind my back? I went ahead of you, I said. This saves the company. You keep your role. Your team gets benefits. Your name, your legacy stays on the trucks. His hands shook as he read through the details. So you think you can just sweep in and buy the business I built with your Wall Street fairy dust? No, I said quietly. I think I can save it before it collapses. He stood up, pacing now. You want me to take a handout? You want me to admit I failed? No. I want you to admit there's more than one way to build something that lasts. I reached into my pocket and dropped a single car key on his desk. What the hell is this? Key to the Ferrari. It's yours. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's thanks. And then I left. Next morning, my phone buzzed. Text from Mom. He took the car. Didn't say a word. Just got in and drove. I just stared at that message for a while. Didn't smile. Didn't frown. Just sat with it. Because sometimes silence says more than words ever could. By evening, he'd called Harold Gentry. 48 hours after that, a deal was in motion. I didn't say anything. Didn't show up. Just watched it unfold from a distance. He signed away the business he'd spent 40 years building. The same business I used to push lawnmowers for when I was 12 and sweating through my t-shirt by 10 a.m. He looked smaller at that signing table, like the weight of it all had finally caught up to him. But when he walked out with my Ferrari key in his pocket and a new 5-year contract in hand, he stood a little taller. 2 months later, I stood in front of 200 people inside the warehouse I'd turned into something new. Clean floors, bright lights, a banner that read, Horizon Analytics, Launch Day. Mom was in the front row, beaming like I'd just gotten married. Theo stood by the AV table, grinning like he already knew what was coming. Drew Now Koo kept checking his notes like he was giving a TED talk. And way in the back, arms crossed, stood my dad. Out of place, uncomfortable, watching like he was still trying to figure out where he fit in the picture. I stepped up to the mic. Today we launch Horizon Analytics, I said. Our goal is simple. Make financial tools as accessible as the apps on your phone. No gatekeeping. No Wall Street jargon. Just real power in the hands of everyday people. Applause. But this isn't just about finance. It's about building something bigger, something that connects the old way of doing things with the future. And that's why I'm proud to announce our first local partnership. I paused, watched the crowd lean in. Horizon is investing $2 million Cinto Southern Edge Holdings, the parent company that now includes Langford Outdoor. Heads turned. My dad's eyebrows lifted, just a bit. We're also launching a new initiative to help traditional service businesses use technology without losing what makes them special. And leading that initiative, another pause, not dramatic, just respectful, is Nathan Langford, my father. For a second, the room was dead silent. Then the clapping started, and grew, and didn't stop. I looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to make him proud. I was just giving him a seat at the table. Dad's built something most of us can't begin to understand. 40 years of grit, loyalty, and getting up when it's still dark outside. That's not just hard work, that's knowledge. And knowledge like that deserves to be passed on, not buried. Afterward, people crowded around, shaking hands, taking pictures. I watched Dad stand off to the side like he wasn't sure whether to stay or bolt for the door. Then he walked over. You planned this, he said. Not angry, just stunned. I planned to build something that mattered, I told him. The rest came together because it was time. He looked around. The warehouse, the sign on the wall, the team hustling past with laptops and coffee cups. He pointed to the logo. Your name's not even on the building, he said. Neither was yours, I said. But everybody knew who built it. He looked at me like he was seeing me not just his kid, but a builder too, just in a different way. He stuck out his hand. I shook it. I already sold the Ferrari, he said casually. That caught me. What? Traded it in. Bought a truck. He paused. Put the rest into company stock. I chuckled. Couldn't help it. Guess we're partners now. Guess so, he said. And just for a moment, he smiled like the weight was off his chest. Want me to jump into the conclusion now? Part 4 wraps everything together: the future, the family shift, and what success really came to mean. 6 months passed in what felt like a breath. I was in my office one morning, sun creeping across the Cooper River, lighting up the water like glass. On my desk was a framed article from the Savannah Business Chronicle. Local tech firm merges tradition with innovation. 150 jobs created next to it. Sat a coffee mug Theo had given me that said, "Keep coding, cowboy." He still ran our marketing team, still the loudest in every meeting, still the guy who reminded me to eat. Drew was thriving as coup, juggling contracts, logistics, and more spreadsheets than I'd ever care to look at. We'd brought in nearly 30 interns from nearby colleges. None of them had to leave Savannah for opportunity anymore. But the most surprising part? Every Tuesday at noon, my dad walked into my office carrying a notebook, a paper folder, and 2 sandwiches from the same daily he's gone to for 20 years. We'd sit, talk, share updates me about growth and partnerships, him about which small businesses were struggling to adapt. Plumbers, electricians, flooring crews. Men just like him. They don't need handouts, he said once, chewing through a turkey club. They just need tools that don't make them feel like idiots. And he was right. That's when we built the Traditional Trades Initiative, his idea, not mine. Workshops, software, support staff, everything aimed at helping small businesses make the jump to digital without losing their soul. Funny thing is, the same guys who used to say tech was kid stuff were now using our tools to triple their client base. And my dad? He wasn't just part of it, he led it. Mom finally retired from teaching. She and Dad went to Italy for 2 weeks. She texted me from a vineyard with a picture of him making pasta in a cooking class. I stared at the photo for a full minute, smiling like an idiot. "Can you believe this?" she wrote. He actually learned how to saute. I could, because something had shifted, not just in the business, but in him, in me, in all of us. That Ferrari, still gone. My ride now was a simple black sedan. Next to it, in the lot out front, was my dad's new truck, nothing fancy, just reliable. And in that quiet symbolism, we both understood. We'd made our point. We didn't need to keep shouting. In the lobby of our headquarters, next to the reception desk, we had a wall. Not for awards. Not for magazine covers. Just one framed quote. "Remember whose shoulders you stand on." My dad picked it. He said it reminded him that progress doesn't mean forgetting where you came from. And for me, it reminded me that maybe, just maybe, success isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about building something so solid, so lasting, that even the people who doubted you can still be part of it. We weren't close in the traditional way. Still didn't hug. Still didn't say much when we didn't have to. But every Tuesday, over those sandwiches, we found something new: respect, not approval, not surrender. Just a quiet, steady recognition between 2 builders. Epilogue: I used to think success looked like one moment. The big contract, the flash of cameras, the sound of an engine as you pull into the driveway, and everyone goes quiet. But now I know it looks different. It's the phone call you don't make, because the person's already there. It's seeing your dad nod when he walks past a whiteboard full of code he still doesn't fully understand. It's making space not just for yourself, but for the people who never made space for you. I didn't get revenge by winning louder. I won by building something wider. And in the end, that was enough for both of us. Story 3. I was halfway through making scrambled eggs when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made me stop mid-stir. Margie Phelps. She was our old neighbor back in Michigan, the type who always had too many cats and too many opinions. I hadn't heard from her in over 6 years. The message? No hello, no setup, just one line: "I'm so sorry about your parents." I still can't believe what I saw today. I frowned, opened the video sheet attached, and my heart sank into my stomach. It was the inside of St. Jude's Chapel, familiar oak pews, tall stained glass windows. It was our church growing up. Christmas services, Easter hats, forced smiles. The camera slowly panned up to the altar. There they were. My parents. My mother in a black lace dress, clutching a handkerchief like a prop. My father stiff and somber, reading something off a folded piece of paper with trembling hands. Behind them was a casket, and next to it, a massive photo of me, my face, my smile, my damn graduation picture. I wasn't dead. I was standing in my tiny apartment in Boston, barefoot in sweatpants, very much alive and suddenly very cold. The video kept rolling. My dad's voice, slow and mournful, filled the room. Cassidy was always complicated, but we loved her. We tried. God knows we tried. My stomach twisted. They were reading my obituary. My mom chimed in, voice delicate, like she was playing the role of grieving mother in some bad high school play. They spoke about a tragic accident abroad, about isolation and mental health struggles and how I'd been lost for years. I hit replay, watched it again and again. They didn't just lie. They didn't just exaggerate. They buried me. Alive. The truth? I hadn't spoken to them in years, not since the day I was scapegoated for something I didn't do. 3 years ago, I was working in our family's small consulting firm, classic family business setup. Dad ran the books. Mom handled HR. And my younger sister, Allison, was the golden child, with 0 qualifications and all the praise. One summer, $75,000 mysteriously vanished from the company's reserve account. Guess who they blamed? Not Allison, who just bought a Louis Vuitton bag on a marketing intern's salary. Not Dad, who refused to switch to digital records. Nope, me. Cassidy Bell, age 28, the one with spreadsheets, receipts, and the actual accounting degree. I still remember Mom's hissed words in our kitchen. Better one daughter ruined than 2. I was gone the next morning. No explanation to clients. No chance to defend myself. Just gone. They blocked my number. Ghosted my emails. Even my childhood piano teacher stopped replying. I became invisible. Eventually, I did what people like me do. I left. Moved to Ireland. Took a barista job. Rented a tiny flat and started fresh. I kept off social media. Changed my name on everything. I lived like a ghost. But I never stopped hoping just a little that one day someone would call. That they'd admit it was all a mistake. That someone, anyone, would ask if I was okay. That day never came. Instead, I got a funeral. The rabbit hole didn't end there. After watching the video 5 times, I tried logging into my old Gmail account. Error. I contacted support, confused. Their response? The account was permanently deleted in 2022 after a death verification request was submitted. They declared me legally dead. Digitally, officially, completely. I wasn't just cut off. I was erased. I didn't sleep that night. The image of my smiling face next to a closed casket haunted me. My own family threw a memorial and didn't even bother to check if I was breathing. I had to know why. I called Aunt Denise, Mom's older sister. She always used to bring me gummy bears and hide extra gifts from me during the holidays. She answered after 2 rings. Hello? Hi. Aunt Denise. It's me. Cass. Silence. Then click. Blocked. My chest tightened. Next, I messaged my cousins. One replied with a thumbs up emoji and never said another word. Another said, "Is this a joke? Because if it is, it's really messed up." Only one believed me. Liam, my youngest cousin. We used to build Lego castles together in Grandma's basement. He was quiet, kind, always a little too sensitive for that family. Cass, are you really alive? Yeah. What did they tell everyone? The typing bubble popped up, then disappeared, then reappeared. They said you died in a car crash in Prague 3 years ago. Said it was too late to bring you home. Cremation. Closed casket. I had to sit down. I'd never even been to Prague. They invented a whole death. I pulled out my records. Flight logs. Rental agreements. Work contracts. My tax filings. No gaps. No accidents. No crash. Then I checked the death registry. There it was. Cassidy Bell. Date of death, August 9, 2022. 'Cause vehicular accident. Filed and signed by a government clerk. Certificate ID. TBX 99,482,013. My hands shook. They didn't just push me away. They manufactured my death. And for what? The answer showed up wrapped in a bow. Allison's Instagram had gone public again. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. White roses, champagne, a beachfront resort in Cabo, her wedding, my family all smiling, cousins, uncles, even Grandpa George, who never left Ohio. And me? Not a whisper, not a single wish Cassidy were here. Then I noticed it. A photo of the reception. Toasts were happening. Allison beamed in her glittery dress. And next to her, my father, microphone in hand, glass raised. The caption? To the one daughter who always made us proud. That was it. That was the trade. Not forgotten. Replaced. I dug deeper. And there it was. 6 months after my death, the trust fund my grandparents left me tuition money, startup seed. My future was transferred. To Allison. Legal. Quiet. Clean. They didn't mourn me. They monetized me. I sat there, staring at her picture in her ivory gown, and something inside me finally snapped. If they wanted me dead, they were about to find out how alive I could be. Once the anger cooled just enough to think straight, I started planning. I wasn't interested in screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. That's what they expected, some messy, emotional meltdown they could twist into more stories about Cass always being unstable. No, I was going to haunt them with the truth. Calm, controlled, documented. First step, legal resurrection. I walked into a law office downtown the next morning, wind still stuck in my coat. Proof stuffed in my backpack like ammunition. Passport records, flight itineraries, apartment leases, tax returns. Everything that proved one simple fact: I was alive. The attorney, young guy, early 30s, looked like he still played in a local band on weekends, scanned my documents. He blinked twice, sat back, and said, "Wait, you're challenging your own death?" I nodded. Slid the forged death certificate across the table. "I'm not dead," I said, voice steady. "But I plan to haunt the people who tried to kill me off." He didn't laugh, just sat up straighter. "All right then, let's bring you back." The paperwork was heavy, fraud complaints, motions to revoke the declaration of death, notifications to banks, insurance, and credit bureaus. But here's the wild part. The moment my legal status changed, just from deceased to disputed, the cracks started forming in their little fantasy. Accounts froze. Investigations opened. Allison's shiny financial bubble started to wobble. But that wasn't the moment I'd been waiting for. That came 5 days later. An anonymous text. No name attached. Just one line. "They're holding a memorial for you this Sunday. Street Jude's." Same church. Same place they pretended I was already gone. I stared at the message for a full minute. Then I smiled. Sunday came, gray and cold, sky full of winter, streets lined with cars dressed in black. I parked down the block, pulled on a black coat, tucked my hair into a knit hat, walked up the sidewalk slow, like I had all the time in the world. The church doors were open. I didn't go in yet. I stood across the street and watched. People walked in hugging each other, solemn, slow, dabbing fake tears, like they were doing their best soap opera impressions. Every few minutes, I caught sight of another face I used to know, family friends, old neighbors, even Mrs. Higgins, my 5th grade teacher, who once gave me detention for spelling extraordinary with 2 O's. I wasn't angry anymore, just numb, like I was watching a movie about someone who used to be me. Inside, the organ played something soft. Candles flickered beneath the same photo they used on the fake obituary. One of my favorites, actually. I was smiling in that picture, genuine, full. I remember the day it was taken. Summer breeze, iced coffee in hand, hope in my chest. My dad stood at the pulpit. Again, Cassidy was troubled, but we never stopped loving her. We prayed for her return every day. Sure, Dad. So much love that you forged a death certificate and rewrote history. My mother sat in the front pew, dabbing her eyes delicately, looking like she'd been coached by a daytime TV actress. And Allison, my sister, my replacement, she clutched her pearls like she thought they'd shatter if she let go. She was complicated, Allison whispered to the crowd. But she was still my sister. I waited, heart beating calm, fingers resting on the cold steel handle of the door. The priest stepped forward. Let us now have a moment of silence for Cassidy Bell. May she rest in peace. I pushed open the doors. The noise echoed through the entire church, two heavy doors splitting wide with a deep wooden groan. Every head turned. Gasps, whispers. One child actually shouted, "Mom, she's not dead." I walked in slow, deliberate. Click, click, click. Each step echoed on the marble floor, like a metronome counting down to their reckoning. My mother turned white as the lilies in the aisle. Her hand flew to her chest, and I swear, she dropped like a stage actor trying to win an Emmy. Full faint, legs tucked neatly under, eyes fluttering just enough. My father dropped his wine glass. "Allison?" She froze. Not a single tear. Just clenched her jaw and twisted her necklace like it could summon a do-over. I didn't say a word. Not yet. I walked straight down the aisle, past old family friends, past the pastor, who looked one heartbeat away from passing out himself. I reached the front of the altar, turned to face them all, and took a deep breath. "Hi," I said, soft but clear. "Sorry I'm late. I didn't realize I was invited to my own funeral." Dead silence. No pun intended. I pulled the folder from my coat, thick, sealed, everything stamped. "My name is Cassidy Bell. I'm alive, and I'm here to correct the story." Gasps, murmurs. I held up the folder. "Here are my immigration records, apartment leases, tax filings, flight logs. I've been living in Dublin, working, paying rent, surviving." My voice didn't shake, not once. I didn't die in a car crash. I didn't disappear. I wasn't lost to depression or drugs or whatever version they sold you. I was erased. I turned and looked straight at Allison. You see, they needed me gone, because 6 months after my death, I air quoted my trust fund was legally transferred to my sister. My entire inheritance, gone. Now the room really started buzzing. Phones lifted. Someone started filming. "Finally, you didn't lose a daughter," I said, locking eyes with my father. "You gave her up. You rewrote the story so your favorite wouldn't have to answer for her mistakes." I turned back to the crowd. They didn't mourn me. They replaced me. Allison tried to step forward, but I shut it down fast. "You don't get to speak. Not today." She froze. I watched her swallow her words like poison. People were whispering now, loudly. Some stood up. Some sat like statues. The spell had broken. Everything they told you was a lie. And now, I'm back to set the record straight. Then I walked out. No mic drop. No yelling. No dramatics. Just truth delivered cold, like justice. As I reached the doors, the church bells began to chime. Poetic, really. Funeral bells. But this time, not for me. Back home, I handed over every piece of documentation to my lawyer. We filed everything: fraud, identity tampering, false reporting, financial misconduct. The state launched an investigation. Allison's accounts were frozen. My parents were served notices. The same people who had orchestrated my funeral, now they had to sit through the paperwork of my resurrection. I watched the forged death certificate get torn in half and notarized. I wasn't just alive. I was legally, fully back. I didn't do it for revenge. Okay, maybe a little. But mostly, I did it because I deserved to exist, to be seen, to be known. They buried me in silence, so I came back with receipts. A funny thing happens when you come back from the dead. People don't know where to look. Some try to avoid your eyes like truth might burn them. Others stare too long, like they're trying to decide if you're real or just some ghost that crawled out of a guilt-ridden dream. After I walked out of that church, things didn't explode all at once. It wasn't loud, it was slow, quiet, the way frost creeps under a doorframe at night. First came the whispers, then the calls, then the spin. My parents went full damage control, said it was a misunderstanding, claimed they had received false information, even released a public statement through some family friend who works in PR, framing it like they were the victims of clerical error. Sure, because people accidentally forge government death certificates every day, but the paper trail didn't lie, and neither did the lawyer I hired. The investigation turned up everything: bank transfers, emails, phone logs, my signature forged on documents I'd never seen, my trust fund rerouted into Allison's joint marital account, complete with a down payment on that beach condo she kept posting about. We filed charges. Allison's husband filed for separation 3 weeks later. Guess he didn't know the money came from a dead sister's ashes. Oops. I didn't watch them burn. I didn't show up for the court hearings. I didn't reply to the pity emails or the half-hearted. We just want to talk voicemails. I'd spent enough time talking. Now I was listening to myself, finally, to the part of me that had been buried under other people's guilt for years. And what she said was clear. You don't owe them anything. Not your anger. Not your attention. Not even your pain. I took what was mine. My name. My money. My identity. The trust was reinstated. Every penny. But more than that, I got something harder to earn. Peace. I moved again. Not out of fear. Just new air. I bought a little cottage up north. Quiet. Simple. Trees tall enough to forget your last name under. I started teaching ceramics on weekends. Built a studio out back with my bare hands and too many YouTube tutorials. Liam came to visit once. He brought flowers and that old Lego set from Grandma's basement. We didn't talk about the funeral. We didn't need to. He knew I was real, and I knew he never stopped believing that. One afternoon, a letter showed up. No return address, just my name, scribbled in my mother's handwriting. I didn't open it. I walked to the river and let the envelope go. Watched it drift and swell until the current claimed it. Not everything broken needs a repair. Some things just need release. They say rebirth comes with fire. Mine came with stillness, with soft mornings and hands covered in clay, with the silence of not having to prove myself anymore. I'll never get back the years they took. I won't lie. That grief still catches me off guard sometimes. Like when I hear a hymn that played at my fake funeral, or see a photo of Allison in some tabloid pretending to be the perfect daughter again. But I don't wish them harm. Not anymore. I just wish them distance. And if they ever tell the story again, twisting it into something convenient, something easy, let them. Because the truth, it's already out there, stamped, filed, restored, and living its quiet, stubborn life in a cottage by the woods. I was supposed to disappear. Instead, I became someone they could never erase again. Not a ghost, not a villain, not a memory. Just me, Cassidy Bell, alive, and finally free.